A beast among men, Eldritch stepped from the crimson glow into the damp streets of London, 1880. The air was thick with fog. The gas lamps cast in flickering pools of light onto the cobblestones. The scent of coal smoke, damp earth, and something more acrid, blood, lingered in the air. Around him, men in top hats and long coats walked briskly, their boots tapping against the stones, while women in heavy dresses hurried through the streets, their faces hidden beneath bonnets. A sudden shout caught his attention. "Murder! Murder! Read all about it!" A young paperboy waved a freshly printed edition of the London Gazette. Eldritch checked his pockets. Money! A key! Without hesitation, he handed the boy a few coins and unfolded the damp paper. "Beast attacks again! Grisly murder in Whitechapel!" The headline was bold and frantic. Beneath it, a crude sketch of something monstrous. A shadowed figure with glowing eyes, its elongated claws gleaming in the moonlight. The details were vague, but the article mentioned a string of killings, all brutal, all marked by something inhuman. The latest victim, a known street thug, had been found torn to ribbons in an alleyway. Eldritch continued down the street, his boots echoing off the wet stones. Up ahead, he noticed a modest townhouse. A single window burned with a crimson glow. He reached into his coat pocket and retrieved the key, testing it in the lock. It fit. He turned it, and the door creaked open. Inside, the space was small but functional. Bookshelves lined the walls. Stacks of newspapers and police reports covered a desk. This was an investigator's home. Or rather, his home. He scanned the walls. Maps of the city, with red string connecting various locations. Notes scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. Detailed theories. Suspects. Patterns of the killings. Then his eyes landed on one image. A lichen. Fangs bared. Claws drenched in crimson. The glow around the sketch pulsed like a heartbeat. His trial was clear. Find the beast. Before it found him. A firm knock rattled the door. Eldritch turned sharply, his mind still reeling from the overwhelming realization of his trial. He hesitated, then stepped forward, unlocking and opening the door. A man stood in the entryway, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a well-tailored dark coat, with a pocket watch chain glinting beneath. His face was weathered but sharp, a man accustomed to hard truths and long nights. He exuded familiarity, though Eldritch had never seen him before in his life. "Another one, Eldritch," the man sighed, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. His voice carried exhaustion, laced with frustration. "Another body, another crime scene. No leads, no suspects, nothing. You've got to have something by now." Eldritch studied him, searching for a name he should know. The man stopped mid-step, his brow furrowing. "What's the matter with you? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, staring into Eldritch's eyes. Eldritch replied instinctively, as if his mind had always known the answer. "Long night, James." James Lockwood. The name rolled from his tongue as if it had been etched in his memory for decades. His partner in this realm, an investigator, just like him. But of course, this world was not real. It was a creation of Lysanor, a carefully constructed game, a deadly game, a game of cat and mouse. Lockwood shook his head. "Yeah, well, I don't blame you. We're running out of time. The papers are hounding us. The police are treating us like we're nothing but glorified drunks, and the city's in a bloody panic. If we don't find this thing soon, there won't be a city left to protect." He moved toward the desk, dropping a stack of files onto the surface, the scent of ink and old paper filling the air. He flipped one open, revealing a gruesome crime scene sketch. 5 victims so far? 6 if you count the one from last night. All torn apart, throats ripped, bodies slashed like an animal attacked them, but no one has seen a damn thing. No tracks, no fur, nothing. Lockwood paused, pointing at the map pinned on the wall, red pins stabbing into various locations like open wounds. Eldritch followed his gaze, seeing a pattern. Here, 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 and here, Lockwood gestured. All the killings are triangulating around this neighbourhood, almost like it's circling something. Eldritch stared at the final location left untouched. His home. Lockwood sighed, rubbing his chin. It's like the bastard is looking for something. Eldritch's fingers traced the map. His eyes darkened with realization. Or someone. London's fog clung to the narrow streets like a silent predator, swallowing gaslights in a veil of eerie gloom. The night was heavy with a dreadful stillness, broken only by the occasional echo of hooves on cobblestone or the distant murmur of a drunkard stumbling home. But there was something else lurking in the shadows, something far worse. Above the streets, something moved. A hulking shape darted across the rooftops, silent despite its size. The darkness swallowed it whole, its massive form a spectre of muscle and fur slinking across the city unseen. Clawed hands gripped the edges of old brick buildings, yellow eyes gleaming in the blackness like distant lanterns. It was hunting. It saw them all. The beggar curled up against a crumbling wall, a pair of lovers stealing a moment beneath a street lamp, a constable patrolling his usual route, twirling his truncheon. Easy prey, weak prey, but not the one it sought. It wanted something more. The beast's nostrils flared, inhaling the scent of the city, soot, filth, sweat, fear. It leapt across an alley, landing without a sound, weaving through the skyline with unnatural grace. A predator in its element, watching, waiting. Then it saw him. A man walking alone beneath the flickering glow of a street lamp, his shoulders broad, his stride confident, something about him familiar. The beast's head cocked to the side, nostrils flaring. The scent was close, so very close. Something deep inside it snarled in recognition. Him. Without hesitation, the beast dropped from the rooftops. A blur of motion, faster than the eye could track. The man barely had time to turn. A scream, a flash of silver claws, a spray of crimson against the cobblestone. The city never noticed. London belonged to the beast tonight. The morning light did little to chase away the horror of the night before. The stench of blood still clung to the air as a frantic crowd gathered near the police barricades, voices thick with fear and speculation. Another murder, the same as before, ripped apart, torn asunder like an animal had feasted on its prey. The constables fought to contain the hysteria. Women sobbed, men shouted in alarm, and the whistle of a patrolling officer pierced the morning air. The cobblestones, slick with the night's rainfall, were still darkened where the victim had met his gruesome end. Eldritch and Lockwood arrived. The moment Eldritch stepped past the cordon, he knew. Something about this kill was different. It was calculated, deliberate. The beast was choosing its prey. Same as before, Lockwood muttered, shaking his head. He looked pale, despite years of dealing with London's worst. Only this time, even the officers can't keep the crowd from losing their minds. Eldritch barely heard him. His eyes scanned the scene, his mind piecing together the unseen story of the night before. He crouched near the blood-stained street. His fingers traced over deep gouges in the stone, as if massive claws had raked across them. He stood abruptly. "We need to go." Lockwood frowned. "Go? But now." They raced through the fog-laden streets, boots striking the cobblestone, as they hurried back to their home. The room was small, dimly lit by the early morning sun, filtering through the curtains. Papers, maps, and photographs were spread across the desk, chaotic, yet purposeful. Eldritch grabbed the files and began laying them out. Every murder, every victim. Lockwood flipped through the crime scene photos, arranging them side by side. Eldritch stood back, arms crossed. His eyes moved from image to image, taking in every detail. One thing became clear. Every victim was a man. Every victim dressed similarly. Every victim was the same age. Every victim looked eerily similar to Eldritch. A heavy silence filled the room. Lockwood exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. No, that's impossible. Eldritch's jaw tightened. It's after me, Lockwood, and I have less than a week to figure out why. Lockwood shook his head. Pace in the room. You're telling me that this thing, this beast, is hunting you specifically? You're saying it's been tearing through London looking for you? Eldritch gestured at the files. The pattern is too clear to ignore. There is something we are missing. Something obvious. It's staring us in the face, but we can't see it yet. There must be a reason. Lockwood sighed, leaning over the desk. His fingers drummed on the wood as he stared at the collection of reports. Then, suddenly, maybe this guy will have an idea. Eldritch glanced at him. Who? Lockwood grabbed a photo, then another, then another. He laid them side by side, pointing at the background of each crime scene. A figure. A man. He was in every single one. Not obvious at first, but always there, lurking in the shadows, standing just out of sight, sometimes behind the crowd, sometimes on a rooftop, never too close but never far. Who is he? Eldritch asked, his voice low. Lockwood studied the image. He's tall, wrapped in an old dog coat. His face. He squinted, tracing the silhouette. His face is half covered by a scarf or something, but his eyes... Look at his eyes, Eldritch. Eldritch felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. The eyes in the photo were pale, piercing, and unnatural. A predator's eyes. Beyond the thick fog and crowded streets, behind iron gates and towering walls, an estate stood hidden in the heart of London. Inside, the mysterious figure from the photos stood before a massive board. Maps, crime scene sketches, houses marked in red ink, photographs of Eldritch and Lockwood pinned to the wall. He muttered to himself, fingers trailing over the markings. His voice was gravel, low and cold. Only 2 city blocks left. He exhaled, the breath slow, measured. I know you're there somewhere, vampire. His gloved hand tightened into a fist. His piercing eyes locked onto the photographs. Then, with a slight smile, one filled with anticipation, hunger, and certainty, he whispered, I will be the first to complete Lysanor's trial. Beneath an ancient, moonlit sky, a dense forest stretched endlessly, wild, untamed, eternal. Trees towered like silent gods, their roots twisted, gripping the earth like claws. A clearing sat at the forest's heart, marked by monolithic stones, worn by time and drenched in the scent of blood and primal energy. In the centre, standing motionless, yet radiating unstoppable strength, was Lysanor, god of the lichen. His form shifted between man and beast, fur rippling like water, eyes glowing like embers, a presence as ancient as the first howl under the moon. A figure stepped into the clearing, his breath heavy with the thrill of the hunt. The beast. His form shrunk, bones cracked, fur burned away, and in his place stood the man from the estate, the shadow in the photographs, the presence in every crime scene. He knelt, head bowed in absolute reverence. I hunger for more strength and power, Lysanor. His voice was firm, unwavering. I wish to be Alpha, not just a pack member. I have what it takes. Lysanor did not speak, yet the command was already inside the beast's mind, Wordless, instinctual, undeniable. Complete the 7 trials. Succeed, and I will grant you the power of an alpha. A slow, knowing smile crept across the man's lips. I will complete these trials. Then the crimson light engulfed him, devouring him whole. When the glow faded, he was gone. The streets of London stretched endlessly, swallowed by the creeping dusk. Eldritch and Lockwood wasted no time, moving from alleyways to bustling markets, from the quiet, candle-lit corners of bakeries to the rowdy clamour of the city's taverns. The photographs of their suspect were passed from hand to hand, questions asked, doors knocked upon, coins exchanged for whispers, but each answer was the same. No one knew him. Lockwood exhaled in frustration. We're asking the wrong people. Eldritch glanced at him. Lockwood continued. Look at how he's dressed. This isn't normal wear for a working man. He's well-to-do, likely aristocracy. We need to be looking higher up. Eldritch smiled. Then we need to find someone who serves him. Lockwood snapped his fingers. The employment department. If he's as rich as he looks, he won't be doing his own laundry. The Employment Bureau. Inside the dimly lit agency for employment, the air smelled of old ink and desperation. Desks stacked with files, weary clerks scribbling furiously, lines of women and men waiting for placements that might keep them from starvation for another week. They questioned every clerk, searched every record, bribed every desperate worker. Nothing. Frustrated, they turned to leave. Then, "Excuse me, sir." A timid voice. They turned to see a small woman, her frame frail, her face bruised, a deep purple swelling around her eye, a split lip healing poorly. "I know him," she whispered, eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. Lockwood instantly stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Who is he?" The woman swallowed, then spoke. "Sir Victor Halloway. He lives in the Blackwood estate." Eldritch felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. Lockwood asked, "Tell us everything." The woman's hands trembled as she continued. "He doesn't keep his staff long. He beats them. Badly. His rage is terrible, like an animal." Eldritch's smile was grim, knowing. Lockwood glanced towards the window, the dark swallowing the city. "It's getting late. We should get back home before—" Eldritch cut him off. "No." His voice was firm. "It's too dangerous there now. The beast hunts at night. We need to use this time to our advantage." He turned, slipping the photograph into his coat. "We're going to Blackwood Estate." The streets of London were silent, choked by the thick, unnatural fog that rolled in like a tide of shadow. The gas lamps flickered weakly, their glow barely cutting through the oppressive gloom. Then, movement, a shape. The beast moved unseen, a phantom in the night, leaping from rooftops to alleyways, navigating the city as if it had lived within these streets for centuries. The only sound was the faintest breath of wind, the distant echo of hooves on cobblestone. Its hunger was not for food, but for vengeance. Clawed hands gripped the edge of a rooftop. The beast crouched, its golden predator's eyes scanning the streets below. A scent filled its nostrils, the scent of its prey. A low, guttural growl rumbled from its throat. It had found him. The beast landed with impossible silence, crouching in the shadows of the narrow street. Before it stood a modest Victorian home, its windows dark. The air was still, yet the scent of Eldritch was thick in the air. A single slow exhale, then the explosion of force. The front door splintered inwards, crashing into the entryway. Clawed hands tore through furniture, shredding wooden chairs, bookshelves collapsing in heaps of torn pages. A howl of rage split the silence as the beast ripped through drawers, overturned tables, shattered glass. Then it stopped. There, on the floor, scattered among the wreckage, was a photograph. A photograph of Victor Halloway, circled in red ink. The beast froze. Eldritch knew. A snarl twisted its face as it turned sharply, leaping through the shattered window and disappearing into the night. It had to return home. Eldritch was waiting. Blackwood Estate. The mansion stood like a tombstone against the darkened sky, its silhouette looming over the deadened land. The iron gate creaked as Eldritch and Lockwood stepped forward. The air was heavy, thick with tension. They entered cautiously, moving through the dim corridors of the estate, their footfalls muffled by thick dust-covered carpets. And then they found it. A study, filled with notes, sketches, pages of research. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings, names of victims, but more than anything else, Eldritch's name. Lockwood picked up a stack of papers, his face pale. Why is he after you? Eldritch studied the notes, his expression unreadable. Because this is more than a hunt. This is a trial. Lockwood frowned. A trial. Eldritch nodded. Lysanor's game. He's pitted us against each other. 2 hunters, 2 predators, and only one of us is meant to survive. Lockwood's grip tightened around the papers. Then we kill him first. Eldritch turned to him. This isn't your fight, Lockwood. Leave now. Go home. Lockwood scoffed. After everything? You really think I'd let you face this alone? The 2 men exchanged a long look. Then finally, Eldritch smirked. Then we prepare. A storm was coming, and the beast was already on its way. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked relentlessly, each second a step closer to dawn. Eldritch checked the time. 3 hours. If they could stall the beast until sunrise, they had a chance. Lockwood gripped his revolver tightly. We should set up a kill zone. Eldritch shook his head. That won't work. Bullets won't stop it. Lockwood frowned. Then what? Eldritch looked out the window, the fog curling through the London streets, hiding the shadows that lurked beyond. He turned back to Lockwood, his voice firm. We don't fight the beast. We outthink it. The monster breaks in. The howl came first. Then the front doors exploded inward, the wood splintering like brittle bone. The beast stepped inside, its clawed hands digging into the walls, yellow eyes burning with pure predatory rage. Eldritch and Lockwood raced up the staircase, forcing the fight to the higher floors. The beast charged, slashing through the wooden railing, sending shards flying. Eldritch and Lockwood darted into a study, slamming the door shut. The beast crashed against it. The wood groaned, splintered, but held. Lockwood panted. That won't hold for long? Eldritch's mind raced. They needed time. The beast had one goal, to kill him. He needed to make the creature hesitate, if only for a moment. His eyes landed on a cabinet filled with old whiskey bottles. An idea struck. Lockwood hesitated. What are you doing? Eldritch grabbed a bottle, shattered it against the desk, and poured the contents over the floor. Making sure it knows I'm still a threat. He ripped down a curtain, wrapped it around his arm, and soaked it in alcohol. The door splintered further. Lockwood looked at him. That won't stop it. Eldritch grabbed a candle from the desk and lit the fabric on fire. The flames crawled up his arm, but he ignored them. I know. The door shattered inward. The beast charged through, but skidded to a halt as it saw Eldritch standing there, arm wreathed in fire. Eldritch's voice was steady. Come for me. Let's see if your master enjoys a burned-out husk for a champion. The beast snarled, but didn't move. Lockwood stared at Eldritch, realizing what he had done. He had forced the beast to hesitate, but it wouldn't last. The fire wouldn't stop it, and it wouldn't run. Then the creature lunged. Eldritch and Lockwood ran. The final stand. They burst onto the rooftop, the fog thick and suffocating. Eldritch was breathing heavily, the fire on his arm dying down. The beast emerged from the broken window, eyes locked onto Eldritch. This was it. Lockwood turned to Eldritch. "We're out of time." Eldritch stared at him. "There's still a chance." Lockwood exhaled, looked at his revolver, then looked at Eldritch. "This is a game, isn't it? A trial. I was made for it, wasn't I?" Eldritch didn't answer. Lockwood smiled. "Then this shouldn't matter." And then he ran at the beast. Eldritch shouted, "No!" Lockwood fired his revolver, knowing it would do nothing, but it didn't matter. The beast turned its full rage on him. Eldritch could only watch as Lockwood was thrown aside, his body slamming into the rooftop tiles. The revolver clattered to the ground. Eldritch's breath caught in his throat. It mattered. It mattered to him. The beast turned back to Eldritch, its claws dripping with blood. And then the first light of dawn touched the rooftops. The beast shuddered, its body jerking involuntarily. Its fur retracted, its claws shrank, and before Eldritch stood a man, naked, breathing hard. His eyes widened in horror as he realized what had happened. Victor Halloway, a man who had just lost the hunt. Eldritch bent down, picking up Lockwood's fallen revolver. He cocked the hammer and pointed it at Halloway's head. The morning light spread slowly across the rooftops of London, casting a dim glow over Eldritch as he stood, revolver aimed at Victor Halloway's head. The former beast lay before him, human once more, panting, weak, vulnerable, yet Eldritch hesitated. "Why do you hesitate?" The voice echoed inside his mind, deep, primal, a voice that belonged to something older than time itself. "Lysanor, if you do not kill him, he will kill you. He will not stop. He seeks power. He does not care for balance. He only cares for himself." Eldritch's grip tightened on the gun, but he did not pull the trigger. "You think I do not know that?" Eldritch answered the god in his mind. "I have seen men like him before. I have killed men like him before, but I do not take life lightly." Lysanor remained silent, but Eldritch could feel his presence looming. "A life is the ultimate possession," Eldritch continued. "A man's existence, his thoughts, his actions, his very essence, belongs to no one but himself. To take that from him is the final act of control, and I do not seek to control others, nor to take from them what is theirs. A life is earned, not given, and certainly not stolen." Lysanor's voice returned, harsher this time. "And yet he has stolen from others. He has taken without earning. He has fed on those weaker than himself, used their power to further his own. Is this the man you spare?" Eldritch lowered his gaze, watching Halloway struggle to breathe. "A man who took your friend's life," Lysanor continued. "A man who takes and takes, who feeds endlessly on those beneath him, who values nothing but his own power. His goal was never survival, it was dominance." Halloway lifted his head slightly, eyes filled with hatred. "Do it, then," he spat. "Kill me, vampire. Prove you are no better than me." Eldritch exhaled slowly. Then he fired. The shot rang through the empty streets. Halloway's body jerked. Blood splattered across the cobblestone. He collapsed, motionless. The weight of the action settled in Eldritch's chest, but his mind remained clear. This was not murder. This was justice, a deliberate and calculated choice, made not in anger, not in vengeance, but in defense of something greater, of those who build, those who create, those who fight for something beyond themselves. Eldritch lowered the gun, letting out a slow breath. The voice of Lysanor returned, but this time it was satisfied. This one wanted power by any means. He took it at the expense of others, feeding off them in my realm for many years. It was I who revealed the trial to him. I knew he would fail. A pause, then, "Thank you, Eldritch." Eldritch barely had a moment to process those words before Lysanor continued. "But, in accordance with the trials, you must now face my champion." Eldritch's fingers tightened around the revolver. "One-on-one with an alpha. A true one." Lysanor's voice held no malice, only certainty. "I must say, I do not hold much hope for you, Eldritch. Even if you had your elder powers, you would not survive. But rest assured, the battle will be a fair one." The air around him crackled. Crimson tear in his pocket glowed brightly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The world around him trembled, fading into nothingness. Lockwood's body lay still on the ground as the last remnants of the trial's realm vanished into the void. And then he moved. The man who had been Lockwood sat up, a small smile creeping across his face. His eyes flickered gold, not human, but something far greater. Lysanor's eyes. "Interesting," he muttered. "Very interesting indeed." And with that, the world was gone. End of Trial 3. To be continued in Trial 4, the Alpha's Challenge.